Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about finding models for lots of things, personal projects, professional projects, etc., etc. So again, this is another question I get a lot, so I figured I'd talk about it. So I'm going to break this down in different categories, and it really depends on what you're doing and where you're at and the exact nature of the project. So I'll kind of talk about each one individually. First, I'll start with the most simple one, which is if I'm doing a job that is let's say a fashion catalog or a magazine catalog, magazine editorial, advertising, I hate to use this term, but a real job, something that there's a lot of money on the line. I was hired to do, and that there's a client who is very particular about the model, at least in general, that in those cases, I always hire a model for a modeling agency. So that might seem simple, and it is really, but why, right? That's really the question. Like, I have a lot of models I work with. I could easily give them the work, and of course, if they were an agency, I just go through the agency. The reason why is kind of relates back to something that I had talked about in previous videos. If you are a professional photographer and if you are doing a job for a client, what gets you paid in the long run, gets you paid meaning coming back, regular clients, a good reputation, is being able to deliver. And as terrible as it sounds, if I'm set up to do a catalog and let's say the client is spending, I don't know, $80,000, $90,000 for that day, right? Between the sets, me, the location, the stylist, the models, and we all are on our way to the set first thing in the morning, and something happens to the model. They get into a car accident, they break their leg, whatever. They can't make it to the shoot. If I call the agency, well, they'll likely call me, obviously. They will be able to deliver to me a very similar, meaning same height, same complexion, same whatever, model for sure. At the very most, it might delay the shoot a little bit because they got to reach out and grab somebody. But essentially, the model agency has a bunch of models. And yeah, you may have wanted model A specifically because you liked her portfolio, but model B is pretty close. And in fact, whenever I book from an agency for any jobs or whatever, I get from the client, which one is your first pick, second pick, third pick. I already have that noted, so I don't have to spend extra time contacting the client. I just go to the second if something happens. This doesn't happen that often, but if it does, and when it does, if you're doing this long enough, this is how you get the job done. If I'm using, let's say, a model that's a friend of mine, and she's great, and I use her all the time, or him, and they're awesome, and the same thing happens. They get into a car accident, they break their leg, they can't do the shoot. I don't have, almost identical other friend that can fill in. Whoever's gonna come is almost certainly gonna be completely different, which is not gonna serve the purpose of the client, right? So you gotta use a modeling agency for that reason. Like, that's literally it. It's literally, that's why they exist, is so that you will get those jobs done. Because frankly, if you've never done anything on a commercial level, it's astounding how much money is involved. I mean, I remember the first time I ever did like a real job, and I mean, the check that I got for the expenses and the whole thing was something like what I was normally making like 4 or 5 months in all my smaller freelance gigs. It was a huge check. It wasn't all for me, obviously, but it was like, holy crap, that's a lot of money, and this is only a small little thing. When you do bigger stuff, it gets even bigger. I mean, it's not unusual to spend, the income of a low-income person on like just a wall being built for a set. I mean, I've spent $30,000 for a wall for clients, so yeah, it can be expensive. That stuff all goes out the window if you can't get the job done. So you got to have backups, and the agency is your built-in backup. That's how you do it, right? Simple as that. Now, case number 2, which is kind of what I'm dealing with a lot more now because I do a lot of videos, and you guys see that I use models in the videos, obviously. In those videos, Yeah, I mean, I kind of have an idea that's based around a model, but generally speaking, we're just trying to create some cool shots to show you guys techniques. It almost doesn't matter in most cases unless I'm specifically doing a video about, I don't know, a dark-haired model. And even then I have like another dark-haired model, even if they're not the exact same height and weight, blah, blah, blah. So for those, I use my circle of models that I work with that I find that are reliable, that I like to work with, that are good on camera, because that's a big thing, meaning video camera. You know, this is what I do. Those models, if something were to happen, those shoots are not as important. You know, even though they're important to me and they're important for my, you know, for you guys like this and for me to make a living, it's not as important that I have exactly the model for those. So for that, oftentimes I don't use an agency. Now, why do I do that? Well, number one, it's cheaper, right? Agency is always going to charge a fee. Agency models are more expensive. And why are they more expensive? Because you get all that backup, right? That's basically what you're getting for the money. You know they're going to cover it. They're going to be doing the legwork. They're going to, you know, they charge for it, so everything comes out. Models that I work with regularly, you know, I can negotiate depending on what I need, right? If I'm doing this job and it has more money, I'll pay them more. If I'm doing this job and it has less money, I pay them less. You know, and they're good with that because I give them enough work and it's between us and no agency is getting a cut of it, and you know, so that works out pretty well. Which kind of circles into the kind of second part of this is, you know, do you pay models? Well, it really depends. I do a lot of testing of techniques and a lot of just shooting because I love to shoot. I'm a photographer and I like to shoot. You know, some photographers only shoot when they get paid. Hired guns, I call them. I like to shoot all the time. If I could just be shooting all the time and not have to worry about it and just shoot whatever I want, I would do that all day long. I love shooting. So I constantly need models to work with for that, right? And I couldn't possibly afford to pay them just to come to my studio and shoot, you know? And also, I've reached the level and I have a good enough reputation that they know they're gonna get something, you know? So most models that are willing to work with me, if it's a test shoot, not a job, obviously, for free, because they know they're gonna get good pictures, right? So they're gonna get good pictures they can use. I'm gonna get pictures I could use, which is called, you know, a time for print or a test. We call them tests in the fashion world, but the internet is time for print, even though nobody ever gets prints anymore. But anyways, the idea being there is that you're trading, right? And just like all things, it should be equal. So what I'm getting is a willing subject that'll do what I want, you know, as far as like trying funky techniques and doing things that might be a little off the wall. What they're getting is pretty much a guarantee of a great picture. If you don't have as good a reputation, then you might find yourself in a situation where, and I don't mean good reputation as in like you've screwed things over, but maybe you just started, right? You may find yourself in a position where you're gonna have to be much more open with the idea of like, hey, we're gonna do this. If you'll work with me, what shots do you need? You know, maybe the model's like, well, I need a new headshot. And you're like, well, I wanna do full length shots. Well, do both, and then we have like a trade. So you may wanna negotiate that with them. I do think that when you're working kind of on your book, it's a good idea to try to work with people that really want to work with you for one reason or the other, versus paying them. Not to say you shouldn't pay models. Actually, it's not a bad idea if you're very, very, very first starting to pay a model, because then you don't have to worry about it. Like you can shoot, and if it comes out like trash, or you want to try something, you're trying to learn something, you don't know if it's going to come out, you paid them, they got paid, you're happy, everybody's happy. Once you kind of know that you're going to get something and you're just kind of like pushing the limits, trade shoots are good. And the reason why I said it is not because I'm cheap, even though I am. It's because I hate to work with a model on a fun project that doesn't just want to do it because it's fun, if that makes sense. Like if you're a model and you're coming to me and you're just like, well, I'll do whatever, but you got to pay me. Okay, that's fine if it's a job and blah, 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 and the client likes you. But the reality is that, you know, there's lots of people that I interact with that would love to just go do something cool. I mean, in fact, I literally just got an email this morning as I was coming in, you know, from this traveling model that wanted me to pay her hundreds of dollars to come shoot. Like, really? Like, I could like walk down the street and get a model. I mean, do you know who you're talking to? And I think that, that may sound like I have a big ego, but you know, you have to look at that like that. And you should be the same way as a photographer, right? If you're watching this and you're a photographer, don't go to the model's page who has gazillion followers and all kinds of amazing pictures and you have like a mediocre portfolio and you're just like, shoot with me for free. Of course not. Why would they? they're more established than you are, right? You've got to meet on a certain level. So if you're just starting and they're just starting, that's a fair trade, right? If you're going to each do something that would good for your books, whoop, drop my water, that's a fair trade. If you are a very well-established photographer and the model has nothing, then them just getting anything from you is probably a fair trade. If the model is super established and you're just starting, then paying her is probably a good trade because you're going to get better pictures because they're going to be more comfortable, they'll be more efficient, they'll actually be able to suggest. Good models are often great at like coming up with concepts, they'll come like with clothing, they'll be better at their makeup. So there's definitely reasons to pay models. And yeah, occasionally, when I started, I would do that because that's kind of, I needed to do it, right? I needed fresh models in my book. Especially, I don't know, I probably told the story in various ways, but I remember when I first moved to Miami, which is kind of where I got started. I'm from Boston, but I shot this whole cool portfolio that was all like girls in sweaters in the fall and like in the studio and blah, blah, blah. And I went to Miami Beach and showed my book and they were all like, yeah, everybody down here is half naked and outside. Like your book is useless. So it was like I had a decent book, but nobody cared because in that market, the book sucked. So I had to quickly establish something. I freaking moved there. I needed to get some clients. So I did immediately to pay some models. Got a few things going in my book. Then once I did that, I went back to the modeling agencies who then gave me models to shoot for free. And then eventually they paid me and whatever, that's how the story goes. But you need to think about where you're at and be realistic about it. Like everybody wants to think that they're really good, or maybe you have maybe you're paranoid and you don't think you're very good. Think about where you're at. You know, if you're established, if you're shooting, if you have a good portfolio, then there's a certain level of model that will work for you, work with you, I should say, for free. And there's ones that you'll have to pay, and vice versa. If you are a super high-end model, I don't care. Like, I'm kind of at the point where I literally could pull models from the top agencies in New York City. I'm not going to pay some traveling model to come pose for me. It never makes sense for me to do that just to do it. Now, if I'm shooting a video for Adorama or for my channel where I'm going to put it online and build my business with it, then I might pay a model if there's a very specific thing, and I do. Any model that you see in my videos, for Adorama and stuff, they're getting paid. We pay all those models because I don't feel like you should ever get paid for something and not pay the talent. So that's my personal ethics on that. That's why, and I may have talked about this before, I get a lot of people that ask if they can assist me for free. Like, I'm not into that because I don't want to use free help. Now, if I'm in the middle of a workshop and I need somebody to hold something, I'll sure as hell be like, hold this, or if it's a friend of mine. But if you're some random person, like, I kind of don't want to have you free on my set. Like, why are you there? It's weird for me. Like, I'd much rather pay somebody if I'm getting paid and not if I'm not. Typically, if I'm doing a test, I'm not going to have some random person there because that's just going to be a distraction. So for all the people that DM me all the time about assisting me for free, or sometimes people ask to pay me to assist me, that's why I say no. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. I don't really want random people that are on the set for no reason. I do one-on-one teaching, so if somebody wants to learn that way where they come and pay me for that, that's different than being on a job, like an actual, my job. So anyways, that's a total side note on there. But so you've got basically always pay models from an agency for big jobs. You've got pay models if you are just starting out for your book, or pay models, smaller non-agency models if you're doing something you're getting paid for. Let's say for instance, you get hired by a restaurant and they just want, some models to be eating dinner there, and they're going to pay you like a few $100s and they're going to pay for the food. You don't have enough money to pay for a model for that. For that, you just get some friends and you get a backup, just in case. And it's almost kind of worth the risk. And of course, be honest with your client. That's the key here. If a client comes to me and they're like, hey, I'm just a small restaurant, I'm a new photographer, and we have only a $500 budget, plus we'll provide food. If you bring in some people and you can do like a shot of people eating with the restaurant, like a very loose shot, would you do that? And if I decide that I'm willing to do it, then I would say, then listen, I'm gonna be able to get people to do this, but we're gonna have to schedule a couple of different days, and just as backups, just in case, because of course I can't really pay people, they're just getting a really nice meal. So, they could bail at the last minute. So, again, setting expectations is always key. So that being said, that's like starting out stuff. Obviously, if it's a big fancy, if it's TGIF Fridays, or is that even around anymore? Whatever, you shouldn't be doing it for $500. That's a massive job. You should be getting paid a lot of money. But I'm talking about the mom and pop pizza place, that you just are friends with. Now I want pizza. But anyways, so I guess the long and short of this is, if you're getting paid for something, you should try to pay people, in my opinion. If you're not getting paid and it's a test, you should try to work with people that either you are more established than and let them know that you're doing more risky stuff. People that are equal to you are also good. But again, for those people, you may need to make sure you give them something that you weren't intending to do. So you can put all that together. Let me know how you guys do it. Well, how do you find subjects and models? Like, do you guys use agencies? Do you go on things like Model Mayhem, like sites like that? Do you Craigslist? I don't know if that's around anymore. Or do you just like use friends? So let me know. Let me know what you guys are doing. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the bell so you get all the notifications, and I'll see you next time.